Any thoughtful person may pause from time to time and consider the unfortunate events that could unfold in life. This is usually driven by the wish to avoid calamity. Someone might think about the ways intruders could break into a home and then take steps to secure it. Or someone might reflect on possible illnesses and try to stay healthy through preventive measures. Yet, in spite of every effort, no one can guarantee a life free from bad outcomes. Seneca points to a second reason for anticipating adversity. By picturing it in the mind, a person can reduce its impact when it finally arrives. As he puts it, he robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand. Misfortune bears its heaviest weight, he says, on those who expect nothing but an unbroken chain of good fortune. Epictetus echoes this by reminding people that all things everywhere are perishable. Anyone who denies this basic fact, walking around convinced that precious things will remain forever, is bound to experience shock and severe distress when those things are inevitably lost. A third, and perhaps more important reason for contemplating what could go wrong is rooted in human nature. People are often unhappy because of insatiable desires. They devote immense effort to getting something they crave, only to lose interest once it becomes theirs. Instead of feeling contentment, a kind of boredom sets in, and new or grander desires begin to form. Psychologists Shane Frederick and George Lowenstein call this tendency hedonic adaptation. One illustration can be found in studies of lottery winners. Winning the lottery typically allows a person to live out many dreams, yet after an initial rush of excitement, most return to their previous level of happiness. The expensive car and mansion that once inspired awe soon become everyday items, no more remarkable than the old vehicle and small apartment they replaced. A more ordinary kind of hedonic adaptation occurs with consumer purchases. After the thrill of buying a widescreen TV or a fine handbag fades, a person often ends up wishing for something even larger or more luxurious. Hedonic adaptation arises in careers as well. For years, someone may dream of landing a particular job, working diligently in school and on the career path to reach that goal. Yet after achieving it, the feeling of success soon dwindles into discontent. Complaints may arise about the salary, the co-workers, or the boss's failure to recognize certain talents. The same dynamic appears in relationships. A person may manage to marry someone they once deemed perfect, only to start noticing flaws and dreaming about finding a new partner. Because of this ever-repeating cycle, many find themselves on a satisfaction treadmill. A new, unfulfilled desire appears. The person toils to satisfy it, hoping for the contentment that will surely follow. The problem is that once a desire is fulfilled, hedonic adaptation causes it to lose its allure. The final result is the same old feeling of dissatisfaction, which in turn leads to a fresh desire. A crucial key to happiness, then, involves interrupting this cycle of adaptation. Once someone obtains what they worked so hard to get, it is important not to start taking it for granted. Also, people must recognize that there are already many valuable things in their lives, quite a few of which they may have grown indifferent to. Things such as a spouse, children, a home, a job, or a vehicle. The challenge is both to prevent adaptation to new gains and to reverse any adaptation that has already occurred. In other words, there needs to be a method for rekindling appreciation for the possessions and relationships already in place. Many thinkers across the world and throughout history have realized that a straightforward path to happiness is to learn how to want what is already owned. This concept sounds simple and is almost certainly true. However, the difficult part lies in actually doing it. How can anyone be convinced to desire the very things already in hand? The Stoics believe they found the solution. They suggest deliberately picturing the loss of whatever is treasured, a spouse leaving, a car being stolen, or a job suddenly disappearing. This mental exercise aims to heighten appreciation for those relationships and possessions. The practice is often called negative visualization, and it goes back at least to Chrysippus. It is arguably the most valuable tool in the Stoic set of psychological strategies. Seneca describes it in his Consolation, written to a woman named Marcia, who was still consumed by grief 3 years after her son's death. While advising her on handling present sorrow, Seneca also points out a way to avoid such consuming grief in the future. Anticipate the events that may lead to pain. All that is cherished, he says, is only on loan from fortune, which can reclaim it whenever it wishes, without warning. Therefore, while loving family members, one must never forget that there is no promise they will remain forever. There is not even a promise that they will remain for long. Enjoy companionship, but occasionally reflect on the possibility that this happiness may vanish. If nothing else, death will end it sooner or later. Epictetus offers similar advice. When someone kisses a child, Epictetus encourages keeping the child's mortality in mind. This youngster is only on loan, not possessed for eternity. During the kiss, consider the possibility that she may not survive beyond tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius supports this guidance in his own writings. Imagining the loss of a child might initially seem painful or morbid, but it can serve to increase one's presence and attentiveness as a parent. 2 fathers illustrate this point. One regularly contemplates the possibility that his child's life might be cut short, reminding himself how precious each moment truly is. The other never entertains such thoughts, moving through the day casually, assuming he can spend time with his child whenever he pleases. The first father is likely to embrace and delight in every chance to interact with his daughter, while the second may barely look up from the day's distractions. The first father ends up living a richer emotional life, even though both share the same reality of potential loss. The Stoics also advise reflecting on the loss of friends. A friend might vanish suddenly, through death, or through a misunderstanding that ends the relationship. Epictetus suggests that whenever there is a parting from a friend, consider that it might be the last. In so doing, the friendship becomes more cherished, and each opportunity to be together is welcomed with gratitude. Among all potential losses, Epictetus encourages everyone to ponder their own death as well. Seneca goes further, suggesting that each day be lived as though it were the last. In fact, Seneca even advises living as though this very instant is the last. This doesn't mean abandoning all caution or leaping into constant hedonistic overindulgence. The Stoics did not intend anyone to fritter away time in reckless ways just because there is no tomorrow. The instruction is to appreciate the uniqueness of each day, to treat it as a rare gift, and thus not to waste it. In daily life, it is entirely possible to plan for tomorrow, while still taking a moment to feel genuine gratitude for today. Contemplating one's own death acts as a powerful reminder to seize the present moment. It drives home the realization that because life ends, every experience is potentially fleeting. By reflecting in this manner, it becomes easier to savor and make better use of the time at hand. The Stoics further point out that material possessions are also subject to loss. Marcus Aurelius suggests thinking, now and then, about being deprived of any familiar object, a house, a vehicle, favorite clothes, pets, money, along with one's personal abilities, such as speech, hearing, walking, breathing, or swallowing. It is even beneficial to reflect on losing freedom itself. Ordinary life often leads people to take these everyday assets for granted. Stoic thought reminds them that, at one time, the very possessions and relationships they have now might have seemed like distant wishes. Even for those who feel they are not living the dream, negative visualization remains applicable. This method is not only for the affluent, it can be practiced by anyone in any circumstance, no matter how dire. A person who has nothing but a loincloth can still contemplate the loss of that last garment. Even after that, health remains, and it too can be lost. Eventually, life itself might be all one has. No matter how restricted a situation may be, there is almost always room to imagine a worse state. So negative visualization can ease the sting of one's hardships. While it cannot make someone in dire need as happy as someone with wealth, it can still reduce misery and lead to a greater degree of peace than might be possible otherwise. James Stockdale's story offers an example of how this practice can help. He was a Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam in 1965, then held as a prisoner of war for 8 years. He suffered brutal treatment and awful conditions, yet emerged unbroken. His explanation is that he practiced Stoic techniques to remain mentally resilient. It is also worth noting that Stoicism does not view deprived people as having to remain so. Improving external circumstances is a worthy pursuit, but Stoics aim to help people lessen the emotional burden of their situation while they work toward a better life. At first, it might seem that the Stoic approach of imagining worst-case scenarios leads to gloom and pessimism. Yet, ironically, the regular practice of negative visualization often transforms a person into a true optimist. Rather than merely viewing a glass as half full, the Stoic might take stock of the fact that there is a glass at all, intact, transparent, and functional. That awareness makes the use of a simple glass a source of satisfaction. Someone who hasn't learned to appreciate life in this way, however, may fixate on the fact that the glass is only half full. Hedonic adaptation usually deadens the sense of wonder that might otherwise color everyday life. Negative visualization counters that deadening effect. By actively thinking about how things could be taken away, a person regains an awareness of how special those things really are. This kind of mindful appreciation restores one's capacity for joy. Children are prime examples of this capacity. Their lack of assumptions about the world can make ordinary experiences feel thrilling. But as they grow, many kids become jaded teenagers who take most things for granted. They might feel bored by a life that earlier had excited them. In some cases, adults maintain that cynicism throughout their lives. They might list in great detail all the things they dislike about their situation, while rarely, if ever, pausing to acknowledge things worth enjoying. Sometimes a catastrophe, like a tornado destroying a home, jolts people awake. It can be tragic, yet it also has a side effect. Survivors might suddenly appreciate what remains. War, disease, and natural disasters share this trait. They are undeniably harmful, yet they can spark transformations in the mindset of those affected, leaving them more alert to the wonders of daily life. Such disasters have obvious drawbacks, though. One cannot rely on a catastrophe to bring about that awakening, and not everyone experiences one. Disasters can also be lethal, leaving no chance for an epiphany. Furthermore, even if a life-threatening event reveals precious insights, that clarity can fade. Soon enough, it's easy to drift back into old habits, ignoring the splendor of a sunset or missing meaningful family moments. Negative visualization, by contrast, avoids these pitfalls. It doesn't have to wait for calamity and doesn't endanger anyone's life. Because it can be repeated at will, its effects can last indefinitely. In this sense, it offers a gentle yet powerful way to restore and maintain appreciation for existence. Many forms of gratitude and thanksgiving mirror negative visualization. Saying grace before a meal can be more than a mere habit or a fear of divine punishment. At its heart, it can be a brief reflection on the possibility that the food might not have been available, or that the people seated around the table might not have been there to share it. That shift in perspective can transform an ordinary meal into a small festival of gratitude. Countless individuals have stumbled on similar methods. They focus on how lucky they are to be alive, to walk unaided, to have any comfort at all. Meanwhile, others with far more resources but no consistent gratitude may be left feeling perpetually unfulfilled. Some people go out of their way to avoid any open display of delight in the world. This can stem from a belief that cynicism is a mark of maturity. Others may do it because they consider it sophisticated or fashionable to appear indifferent. They might roll their eyes at someone who finds wonder in everyday objects, asking, "Why settle for so little? Always want more." However, Stoic thinking suggests that refusing to enjoy what is already present is the real foolishness, especially if the goal is to achieve some measure of life satisfaction. It seems unwise to spend life in dissatisfaction when contentment is so often within reach by adjusting outlook. If imagination is active, negative visualization becomes simple to practice. Just picture a favorite possession, like a house, going up in flames, or a career ending, or a personal skill being lost. If imagination falters, there are alternatives, such as observing the misfortunes that befall others and realizing that the same could happen to anyone. It can also help to learn about earlier generations. Life today is often far more comfortable, with modern medicine, climate control, technology, and other privileges that were unavailable in the past. Realizing this can spark gratitude for what might otherwise be taken for granted. And in the future, descendants may well look back on current times and say, "Thank goodness we aren't living back then." Negative visualization can also be done in reverse. Besides imagining yourself in someone else's unfortunate situation, picture a mishap that happened to you as though it had happened instead to another person. Epictetus offers the example of a servant dropping a cup. The unfortunate owner might be furious, but if the scene occurred in someone else's house, anger would likely be replaced by, "Don't worry, it's only a cup." Looking at events from this outside perspective can diminish their emotional sting. There is a possible concern that picturing all these awful scenarios might be contradictory for Stoics. Aren't Stoics supposed to be serene? And isn't it depressing to list what might go wrong? This objection mistakes a Stoic's occasional reflections for constant dwelling on problems. A Stoic need only do this occasionally, perhaps a few times a day, or even just a few times a week. The aim is to acknowledge the fragility of good fortune, not to brood on it without pause. Furthermore, contemplating a bad outcome is distinct from worrying about it. Contemplation is a rational exercise, much like a scientist studying a tornado. It need not trigger anxiety. Another challenge arises. Doesn't appreciating something deeply make the loss of it far more painful? Indeed, the Stoic father who cherishes a child after reflecting on mortality may suffer terribly if that child is lost. But consider a father who never bothered to appreciate his child until it was too late. When that second father loses a child, he is likely to be overwhelmed with regret, tormented by if-only thoughts about time squandered. Both fathers would experience sorrow, but the first might have some comfort in knowing he made the most of every moment. The second father faces not just heartache, but guilt as well. By encouraging negative visualization, Stoics not only heighten appreciation, but also maintain readiness for life's twists. Marcus Aurelius warns that, while it is good to savor possessions, becoming so attached that their loss destroys one's peace of mind is dangerous. Seneca similarly advises enjoying life's gifts, but never becoming their slave. In practical terms, this means savoring what is possessed, while simultaneously preparing for change. This mindset can cultivate a resilient kind of joy, one that endures even when the world shifts. There are clear parallels between Stoic and certain Buddhist teachings. Both of them advocate reflecting on how transient everything is. Seneca notes that all human things are perishable, and Marcus Aurelius compares the objects of attachment to leaves clinging to a tree, destined to drop when the wind blows. Indeed, flux and change are woven into the nature of the universe. The reality is that everything beloved, people, possessions, circumstances, will one day be lost. Death alone guarantees that. And more broadly, any activity or condition that cannot continue indefinitely will have a final occurrence. At some point, there will be a last breath, a last walk, a last cut of the hair, or a last kiss. Once in a while, the world offers advance notice that a particular experience will be the last. A restaurant might be closing, making a final meal there more poignant. A cherished friend might be moving far away, and a goodbye kiss could be the last one. Moments like these tend to be deeply bittersweet. Yet the Stoics suggest that every encounter, however routine, could be the final one. By keeping such thoughts in mind, a person can invest daily life with a special richness, no longer sleepwalking through it. Some might fear these reflections as depressing, but in fact, they can lead to a more vital and focused existence. Life, for all its instability, becomes more radiant and immediate once its impermanence is acknowledged. There is no need to wait for a disaster or a narrow escape from death to finally appreciate the everyday. Rather, the practice of negative visualization allows a steady, gentle reminder. Everything is temporary, and precisely because it is temporary, everything is precious.